Good morning, everybody, or good afternoon, depending on where you are. It's usually David that introduces me, and then I introduce the speaker. But given that David is now the speaker, or at least one of the speakers, it's my privilege to actually introduce David. I guess everybody knows David Gallo, who's the director of the Aifc Academy of Law. He's a lawyer by training, also has an MBA. And David has spent most of his career actually with General Electric, one of the more than 100-year companies, and he has worked in the capacity as company lawyer, but also as a corporate compliance officer, not only in the US, but also in Europe. David will be providing an overview of the various webinars that the Aifc Academy of Law is providing. He will do that for about 20 to 30 minutes, and then afterwards he will hand over to someone else who he will introduce, and that's to talk about the US bar exam, so to allow lawyers to actually practice law in a respective jurisdiction in the United States. So let me hand over to David, who is going to promote, as he should, the Aifc Academy of Law. David?
Thank you very much, Professor Alexander. I really appreciate the gracious introduction, and welcome to everyone who has joined us today. Now, some of you may have been on the call about 10 days ago, where we provided a fairly comprehensive overview of our upcoming courses at the Academy of Law. So for those of you who have joined on this follow-up session, we appreciate it. And for those of you who haven't heard this before, welcome. I'm going to spend, as Professor Vandeput mentioned, probably about 20 or 30 minutes, just giving a very high-level overview of the courses that we have coming up over the next 12-month period. And then I'm going to turn it over to our collaboration partner from Barbary International, and I'll give a more proper introduction to that segment of our presentation when we get there. At the end of the entire presentation, we'll do some Q&A. You can send your chat questions in to my colleague Almas, who will be receiving your questions. And then if we have time at the end, we'll try and cover as many of those as we can. Almas, next slide, please. Okay, so as most of you may know by now, the Academy of Law was formed to support legal system development, to cross-train lawyers in multiple jurisdictions, with the primary goal of preparing them for international commercial law practice. And the way we've done that is we've actually organized our activities around 4 primary pillars. The most substantial and significant would be the legal education pillar, and that's what we're going to talk about today. But just for your information, the other pillars include publications. So we're looking to launch legal commentaries on Aifc law. We're looking in 2021, potentially to launch a legal magazine. The third pillar is pro bono. Pro bono means technically for the public good. So we manage and operate the region's first pro bono program, which is basically giving free consultations and legal advice to those who need it, as a way for lawyers to basically give back to society and help out in areas of social need. And then finally, we're set up as in a similar structure as a law society or a bar association, or even as a law school. And that is that one of the things that we do is we sponsor activities and projects for the professional community of lawyers. And so we basically fill that role that a bar association or a law society would. And that would be things on things like policy development, white paper development, social and professional networking activities, and so forth. So that's how we're set up. So we're going to talk about the legal education aspect of the Academy now. Okay, so the Academy over the past year has delivered a number of variations of what we call our Foundations program. And we look at one of our primary responsibilities to include providing legal education and creating awareness as to the legal framework at the AIFC, because we're basically attempting to share the good news. And this is especially important for lawyers or prospective legal practitioners who want to operate and represent clients or represent their companies in the AIFC legal ecosystem. So we have delivered a number of variations on our Foundations program. This is Foundations in the AIFC legal framework. We've done a couple of these for students. We also did a specialized version for the community of journalists, the community of notary publics, and then also we've been working with some local law school university professors, and we actually did a full-fledged training program on AIFC law and practice with a view toward training the trainers, if you will. You know, that is to get professional educators who teach in the top local law schools, get them up to speed on AIFC matters so that they can actually become our lectures, visiting lectures, if you will, from time to time. Okay, so we're going to run another Foundations program starting in October. It will run for 3 months. It's new and improved. The beauty of delivering multiple versions of this event is we solicit feedback, and then we try and incorporate that feedback into improvements in our curriculum or in our delivery, the materials, lectures, and so forth. And so it's really a closed loop process, because then we continuously attempt to gather that input and move forward. So we're very much looking forward to starting this program in mid-October. By the way, more to come on specific dates, but basically October is when all this will start, and we'll be publishing more details around all of that, including registration procedures and so forth, to make it easy. So Foundations for Students, 3 months. We'll get into the details on that in a few minutes. We're also going to be launching a Foundations for lawyers and executive business professionals in early 2021. That will be a longer version of a Foundations course. It will obviously also be a bit more technical, a bit more complex, because we're catering to those professionals who are already lawyers. Then we're going to talk today about a number of certificate courses. Now, this is going to be our primary focus through the end of 2020 and into 2021. And that is that while the Foundations programs have been important, and we're going to continue to deliver them because there's a demographic market that we need to serve, both in the student and professional communities. But we also then, on a parallel path, want to diversify our offering to offer more sophisticated, topic-specific programs. These are basically certificate programs. So they will be certificates issued by the AIFC Academy of Law. In some cases, they will be co-issued by the Academy of Law and other AIFC bodies or organizations. The format will be fixed for each of these programs, and I'll get into that in a minute. But you can see the list of topics there. Now, we narrowed in on these topics based on feedback from the market. So we did a number of surveys. We received some excellent feedback on the kinds of topics that local practitioners, as well as international practitioners who are interested in working here, have expressed as areas of interest for them. First, and maybe foremost, would be we are committed to working with our other AIFC bodies to be that education platform for the other bodies, so that we can go ahead and enable them to deliver on their learning and development and educational programs, because they have their own targeted markets and they have their own specialized material. So it's really a fabulous thing. We work really as one family, and we'll get into the lecturers and the topics in just a few minutes. So AIX listings, that's going to be debt and equity listings, as well as capital markets. AFSA is the Astana Financial Services Authority. If you become a regulated company here, then you'll need to know something about how to operate within the regulatory regime. That's what that one's about. HR law and practice, corporate governance, contracts law, contracts workshop, which is going to be kind of the hands-on version of contracts law, legal writing, anti-money laundering and compliance, business skills for lawyers. I'm going to talk about each one of these briefly on the following pages. In addition to the foundations program and the certificate courses, I'm now on the right-hand column of this page. We're going to do some short courses, and these are going to be 1 to 2 hour formats, kind of a continuation of our webinar series, which we devised during the lockdown, if you will. We're going to have kind of 2 categories of those short technology-based courses. One is legal talks. Those are going to be more like 1.5 to 2 hours. Generally, they will cover emerging areas of AIFC law and practice. They may include panel discussion formats with multiple specialists. We're going to try and do at least one of those every 2 months, and we might add programs as we go along, but that's the target for now. Webinar series, not a big distinction in definition from legal talks, but these are going to be more of our 1 hour format. They're going to be on relevant topics of international law that are applicable or of interest to practitioners here in the AIFC. What do we mean by AIFC BD? Business development for the AIFC other bodies. We're again attempting to share the good news about the benefits and procedures and processes around becoming an AIFC participant company. And to that end, we are working with multiple groups and subgroups within the AIFC, like the tax department, the policy, corporate policy departments, and so forth, to provide them with a platform to help deliver their legal education messages. We'll try and do webinars at least once monthly, in some cases more than that. Then finally, international qualifications. I'm going to talk a little bit about our AML and compliance programs that we're in the process of putting together. Now, these will be proper certification programs issued by certain global providers with international reputations who would be collaborating with us so that we could make available these certification programs with world-class partners. Barbary, I'll introduce that at the end of my talk, and that's pretty exciting stuff. I have our collaboration partner who will be delivering that message about the Barbary products and services with a view toward enabling local and regional lawyers to become licensed US lawyers or licensed English solicitors. So that's pretty exciting. Okay, Almas, next page, please. All right, we talked about the Foundations program for students. It starts in October. It consists of 5 modules. Each module has 5 one-hour lectures. So it's a total of 25 lectures. This will start October on every Tuesday from 5 o'clock to 7 o'clock p.m. Now that most people are back to work in a full-time basis, whether that's from at home or in the office, we are finding that people generally have gotten busier and busier. So we think that in the late part of the workday, from 5 o'clock to 7 p.m. will be most convenient for our targeted demographic market segments, if you will. So students, so the program for students by definition means they're going to be busy students and they generally are going to be in class during the day. So we've purposely designed this program so as not to overwhelm them, as they are already full-time law students. So this will be a supplement to what they do every Tuesday night for 2 hours, and that will continue over the course of a few months. Who are the lecturers? Okay, so we really have been selective on making sure that we have the right lecturers who are the best fit for this program. LAC, so that's short for Legal Advisory Council, the AIFC Legal Advisory Council. And then AP is short for the Advisory Panel for Legal Regulatory Matters. These are both AIFC advisory panels or committees. They were in the room where it happened. The committee membership includes senior, seasoned, highly experienced barristers and lawyers for the most part, some of whom came from the legal education world, others who came from the practice world. And so we do have some of our LAC and AP members who will be guest lecturers during this foundations program. Also, I say this with utmost sincerity, across the AIFC, in the various AIFC bodies, so we mentioned the AFSA, which is the regulator for financial services companies, the stock exchange, we have a company called Business Connect, we have the courts, we have the International Arbitration Center, and we have the AIFC Authority Legal Group. They are among the most talented groups of people that I've ever worked with under any circumstances. And we're honored and privileged to have a number of specialists and experts from those organizations who will be the lecturers in this program. The Seven Pillars Law Firm, they are an AIFC participant firm. They're very progressive, legal tech and other specializations. Well, they have agreed to be kind of our headline sponsor for this group. So they're going to be helping with curriculum development as well as providing some of the lectures. So we're pleased and thrilled to have them on board with the Academy of Law. Also, we're looking to potentially make available some sponsored scholarships for students in this program. There's a very modest registration fee, but it looks like we may be able to make available a number of scholarships. So stay tuned. When you register for this course, you'll have an opportunity to apply for a tuition-based scholarship. Okay, I mentioned there are 5 modules, very high level. The first module, which is consists of 5 one-hour lectures, is in the foundations of the AIFC legal framework. So it's basically, it is what it sounds like. It's the big picture. It's the context as to how the AIFC is structured. And it's a discussion of the interrelationship among the various components of the AIFC. For that one, for the most part, we have a specialist from our own legal department who will be the lecturers, and we do have others from some of the committees that I mentioned to you a minute ago. Foundations and AFC financial services regulations. I talked about that a minute ago. You'll have specialists who will come from that organization who will be our lecturers. AFC dispute resolution, that will cover the courts, the court system, how they're set up, their policies and procedures, as well as the International Arbitration Center. We will have representatives from the stock exchange. I mentioned that a minute ago. We're going to have a deeper dive program also for each of these topics. We're going to talk about that though in a minute, but these are the topics for the foundations courses. And then finally, Islamic Finance is an important pillar within the AIFC, where we hope to become a center of excellence and certainly a destination for international parties looking to launch various Islamic finance transactions within the AIFC. Okay, Almas, next page, please. I'm going to pick up the pace here a little bit. Okay, so we talked about foundations. We talked about how in the foundations course, we do kind of a high-level teaser and overview of each of many of these topics. But on the certificate courses, this is really the 6-hour format. So it's a total, each of these certificates that I'm about to speak to has the identical format. So it's a certificate of completion. That means you need to attend every class. It will all be online. Attendance will be noted. If you have to miss one, we will have the pre-recorded version of the lectures that we will make available to you upon your request. In order to get a certificate of completion, you will need to complete all 6 of the lecture hours. Well, those 6 hours are divided across 4 different days. And basically, the rule of thumb will be, it will be 1 day a week. We'll provide you more detail on this. And it'll be a 1.5 lecture, and we'll do that 4 times. So 4 lectures, 1.5 hours each, and that will comprise the 6 hours total to enable you to earn your certificate of completion. Again, we're going to do this from 5 o'clock to 6:30 p.m. Our target markets, if you will be the legal community. So not necessarily the community of law students, but the community of lawyers. So these would be private practitioners from small, medium, and large firms, or in-house corporate counsel, or government lawyers, or solo practitioners. So the full range of legal professionals will be welcome to participate in these activities. Since these are working professionals, again, we thought from 5 o'clock to 6:30, 1 day a week, would be appropriate and convenient for our learners. So, upper left, stock exchange listings and capital markets. Okay, what do we mean by listings? We mean debt and equity, we mean bonds, we mean stock. We're talking about IPOs or partial IPOs for stock. Capital markets, generally, that means secondary market transactions. So once corporate finance activity happens, i.e. money raising activities through original issuances of debt and equity structures, and then the proceeds of which actually are reinvested by the company. Capital markets transactions is part of that definition, but when we think about capital markets, we're thinking about secondary market activity. So that could be bonds being bought and sold on the capital markets, or stock being bought and sold on the capital markets. And there's an entire regulatory regime around that. So both sets of regulations actually really matter here. So AIX listings and capital markets will be part of what we cover. You can see the topics are going to include introduction to the London Stock Exchange and AIX listings and how those two may intersect. And we'll talk about some definitions around that and some potential transactions around that. I already mentioned IPO processes. So these are going to be regulatory and general listing requirements around AIX matters. And these will include some of our LAC members as well as AIX, and actually some AFSA experts are going to participate in this AIX certificate program. That leads us upper right to the AFSA. So that's the Financial Services, Astana Financial Services Authority regs. They are the regulatory body for financial services institutions whose activities fall within the regulatory regime. So it's going to be important for lawyers to understand what are these regulations, what is the process around a regulated company becoming formed and recognized within the AIFC umbrella, if you will. And then what are the compliance requirements and the ongoing reporting and disclosure matters that regulated companies will have if in fact they are regulated by the AFSA. Well, these are all things that lawyers need to know so that they can assist their clients along every stage of the supply chain. So back to the AIX, pre-IPO, IPO, and so forth. For AFSA, it's registration as a company, compliance around the regulations, disclosure, and so forth. So these are all things. 6 hours can go pretty quickly, but the idea is these are going to be deeper dives, into these topics. This isn't our formal terminology, but think about master class level legal education. That's what these are intended to do. HR law and practice, I'm down in the lower left. Well, HR is an interesting topic because it's an area where there is clearly a gray zone between HR and law, because virtually everything that HR does has legal implications. So these would be employment law matters, AIFC employment law matters, some discussion around comparative issues with other employment law regimes, but the primary focus will be on AIFC employment law. Everything from, again, think of the whole value chain of HR, everything from recruiting and onboarding new hires to immigration and visa matters, contracts of employment, policies and procedures that employees are expected to understand and comply with. But it doesn't work only one way. The company also has responsibilities, accountability, policies and procedures that are built around fairness. Well, these policies and procedures basically are codified into our employment laws and then supplemented by companies' own policies and procedures. So this is an area where we're actually, we're going to be marketing this program to not only lawyers, employment law lawyers, and even those who may be involved with every aspect of employment law, but also human resources managers, human resources leaders, kind of a train-the-trainer type thing on law and practice. And then, of course, you know, there sometimes is an end game with employment. So offboarding, if you will, employment disputes, things that can go wrong, and how companies should be dealing with these things from a legal standpoint. We are privileged to have the Pinsent Masons law firm, as well as KPMG, who have agreed to collaborate in delivering this program. It will be amazing. I'm a little bit biased here, but we have some incredible speakers and top-notch presenters from both Pinsent Masons and KPMG. Stay tuned. Corporate governance. Now, our own Professor Dr. Alexander Vandeput, who you met at the beginning of this presentations, well, Alexander is the chairman, actually, of the AIFC Academic Council for the Academy. He's also the head of strategy, and he's the head of governance for the entire AIFC. So we're very pleased that Dr. Vandeput himself will be providing the first lecture out of the 4 lectures. He'll be giving the first lecture. He is, without a doubt, and I say this authentically, probably the most well-educated and experienced corporate governance professional who I've ever met. And so we're very lucky that he'll be framing up and providing context for this program. But then from there, it's going to get very legalistic very quickly. Because when you think about corporate governance, not only are there policies and procedures that AIFC companies are required to comply with around how things are done, how things are voted on, how matters are considered, communications, compliance, and so forth. But also there will be a lot of legal implications around establishing and managing corporate governance programs. So when a company comes to a lawyer and says, well, hey, you know, we really need to have a proper world-class corporate governance system put in place, well, more often than not, they go to their lawyers to request that advice, to ask their lawyers to help them establish their own governance program. Well, then that program needs to be implemented, and directors, officers, even employees, certainly employees, all need to know what these policies and procedures are. most of these policies and procedures do have legal implications. They translate into obligations of the company and obligations of the individuals. And if those obligations are not complied with, there are legal ramifications. There's liability around that. So all the training and other work around implementations, the ongoing updates of compliance training and compliance programs, and then if things happen to go wrong, if there's an allegation of non-compliance, well, that could create liability for the company and for the individuals. It could create harm to individuals who are aggrieved by that, whether it's shareholders or otherwise. And so lectures 2, 3, and 4 will very much have more of that legal focus. So this is a prime example of where law, business, ethics, and compliance all intersect in the area of corporate governance. Almas, next page, please. Okay, 4 more certificate programs. There are actually 5 more. 4 are on this page. All right. All of the statutes within the AIFC, all of the laws, procedures, rules, policies, they all matter. They're all important. They're all there for a reason. When I step back and think about areas that are going to be probably the theme that recurs most frequently on almost any commercial transaction that matters or any commercial relationship that matters, well, there's probably a contract that underlies that transaction or that relationship. So contracts law, I would suggest, is probably the most important starting point for those who want to do a deeper dive into the AIFC and common law of contract. So the curriculum, if you will, for this program, the syllabus, I should say, really reads like the table of contents of a law school casebook. And basically, the 4 primary topics that will be covered will be contract formation, variation of contract. Okay, so formation, first of all. So that's going to be things like freedom of contract, mutuality of obligation, implied terms, warranties, collateral contracts, and so forth. So it feels like common law of contract, first year of law school, basically. But because a lot of our audience may not have had extensive experience with the common law version, the kind of the English, the English law of contract, if you will, this course will be important for them. Second topic is contract variation. What does that mean? Well, once a contract is established, how do you deal with that contract? It needs to be implemented. So there are things that come up, waivers of rights or obligations, estoppel principles that may apply as kind of a defense, if you will, or an excuse from performance. Assignments of a contract, assignment and novation, termination of contract. So that second lecture will cover some of those topics. Defenses and remedies. So, defenses to performance. What happens if there's non-performance? What about frustration of purpose or impossibility of performance? These are topics that came up during COVID, and they continue to come up, where parties through force majeure or other circumstances were unable to perform their contract. Or impossibility. What if there's a factual matter that comes into play where one party, it's impossible to perform that obligation? So those kinds of things will be covered. Finally, breach of contract and damages. So what do we mean by damages? Money damages, or maybe getting money won't address the harm. So there needs to be an order of specific performance of those obligations rather than money damages. So those are the things that will be discussed. Again, we are very pleased that the law firm, international law firm of Baker Botts, led by a senior partner there, who actually was the author of the commentaries on DIFC laws, as well as the statute on implied and unfair terms, as well as the statute on electronic transactions. Well, the guy who led all of that will be leading this contracts law certificate. So you won't want to miss that. Contracts workshop, I'm in the upper right now. Okay, so contracts is a very hands-on subject. It's one thing to learn the theory, which is what we're doing in contracts law. It's another thing to actually practice contracts law. So there will be a hands-on 4 lectures, sessions, if you will, more of a workshop structure around structuring contracts, negotiating contracts, drafting contracts, implementing and managing contracts. Many contracts have long shelf lives. Think about a construction project for a petrochemical plant. Well, that's a project and a contract that will be in place and managed over a multi-year period. So what happens if there are variations or minor breaches or whatever? So implementation and management will be covered. And then, of course, dispute resolution. What if things go bad? So they're going to be, mediation, arbitration, litigation, and so forth. A concept that is one of my personal favorites is dispute avoidance. And there now are emerging techniques among transactional lawyers whereby they're looking for ways to collaborate constructively and to construct these contracts in a way that's designed to avoid dispute. So that's an emerging trend that I'm personally very pleased to see happening, especially in an international cross-border environment. Legal writing, okay, you all are already great legal writers. If you're lawyers, that means you've had proper training in legal writing. In a common law environment like the Aifc, we want to make sure that we're providing opportunities for lawyers to really brush up, get some basics, get some hands-on training around things like drafting client letters, other correspondence and memoranda, applications to the court, pleadings and communications with courts. There's a specialized type of writing around that, pleadings and so forth. There won't be a lot of time spent on any of these things because there isn't enough time to spend a lot of time. However, these are areas that in any legal writing course we'll try to at least high level, to hit some of these subjects. Basic communication etiquette, again, in a common law setting, dealing with other lawyers, dealing with clients of other lawyers. There's a whole etiquette around that. And then there are legal writing implications that we're going to be addressing in that course. Four Stones Building Chambers, fabulous set of lecturers, highly experienced. I should have mentioned back on the contracts workshop, 36 Chambers group. The lecturers and instructors for that, again, international barristers. They do this for a living. In working with, within their own pupillage programs and so forth. So we're really looking forward to both contracts workshop and the legal writing program. AML compliance. So again, this is now going to be kind of a deeper dive on anti-money laundering and compliance matters. We will be running these courses with the idea that we're going to be adding proper certification courses later in 2021. But this first 6-hour program will be a nice teaser, if you will. When you think about anti-money laundering, well, that's a subject in and of itself. But we're going to try high level to talk a little bit about the sectors where anti-money laundering is most prevalent, like the insurance sector, trade, financial services, any areas that are kind of cash flow intensive or whatever are topics of anti-money laundering regulation and then compliance around that. You see other things, export controls, data protection and privacy, things like that. This is going to be kind of a high-level survey course on anti-money laundering and compliance. We have one of the international firms, Baker and McKinsey. We also have other guest lecturers who will be coming from our various advisory committees, as well as within the AFSA. Okay, Almas. Final slide for me. Business skills for lawyers. You know, again, we've all been to law school. We've all had our legal training, but we have found that there are many lawyers, based on our surveys that we have done and so forth, who are fabulous lawyers, but they really never had any academic, conceptual, theoretical business training. So when you think about lawyers serving the needs of their clients, well, in a commercial setting, their clients are generally companies or some kind of business organization. So some of these business skills and the terminology and techniques are important for lawyers to know, because they're going to understand their clients a little bit better in some of these areas that are part of the day-to-day work of their clients, their corporate clients. Okay, so look at the list of topics: leadership and strategy, HR and performance management, business development and marketing for the legal profession, emotional intelligence. These are all topics that corporations care about. But then think about lawyers in their own practice. Okay, so with a law practice is a business, and law firms have their own internal structure where they might have legal practice groups. You have managing partners. So you have an entire management and leadership structure within a law firm setting. Or think about corporate counsel, where the in-house lawyers for companies may well manage teams of lawyers. Well, lawyers as managers within their firm or within their legal department in a company, well, they could benefit by sharpening some of their business skills. So you see the topics again there. So how do they manage and lead within their own law firms or within their own legal department? So business skills for lawyers. I'm especially excited about the lectures we have here. Again, we have Alexander Vandeput, who will be leading lecture number 1 on leadership and strategy. Performance management. We have a top-notch head of business development and marketing for one of the major firms, who will be handling performance management as well as business development and marketing, specifically designed for the legal profession. Emotional intelligence. We have a well-known law professor from a well-known US law school who is the author of a book on developing your professional persona as a lawyer. She has graciously agreed to do our lecture number 4, so we're really excited about that. Okay, with that, next slide, Almas. I'm now going to introduce my friend and colleague, if you will, Christopher Jorgensen, who is from Barbary International. Chris is the Director of International Partnerships at Barbary. Chris is a US qualified lawyer. I believe, Chris can correct me if I'm wrong, I believe in the state of Wyoming. And Chris is also a qualified solicitor under the laws of England and Wales, under the Solicitors Regulation Authority regulatory regime. So Chris is a true Renaissance man from the legal world. And I'm very happy to introduce Chris, who's going to talk about how you can become an English solicitor or a US qualified lawyer by practicing, by studying through the AIFC Academy of Law in Barbary. Chris, take it away, please. Welcome, Chris.
Thanks, David. Always good to see you, and welcome everyone. Thank you for having me today. As David mentioned, Barbary is one of the collaborating partners with the AIFC, and I'm here today to talk to you a little bit about a couple of our programs. In terms of housekeeping or sort of a roadmap today, this is going to be a very high-level overview of the programs. There will likely be a lot of questions that you may have following completion of my presentation, and I would just suggest that when you have those questions, please get in touch with David and his team. They take very good care of you as well as Barbary, and they know the ins and outs of the programs that we offer, so they can absolutely answer your questions as they come up. So Almas, would you mind moving to the next slide, please? When we talk about dual qualification as a U.S. attorney, one of the first places that we kind of begin the conversation is, why on earth would you want to do this? And for our students that are pursuing U.S. qualification as a second qualification, who are working or living in a different jurisdiction in the U.S., these are the reasons that we see they pursue it. They're wanting to distinguish themselves, develop a global relevance so that they can service cross-border transactions or more internationally focused clients, and also offer themselves the opportunity to move their practice around beyond their home jurisdiction. And really what all that translates into is improvement in employability. It makes you a more competent lawyer, a more relevant lawyer on a global context. And while you may have your own reasons for pursuing qualification in the US or in England and Wales, these are some of the reasons that we tend to see from our students. Next slide, please, Alma. In terms of Barbary as a company, we're a US-based company. We've been doing this, that is preparing students to pass the US bar exam, for over 50 years. David and I are both alumni of Barbary, and it amounts to over 1.3 million students that have gone through our programs. That makes us the #1 prep program in the United States. Next slide, please, Thomas. And the next question that people always have is whether or not they're eligible to sit the US bar exam. Now, each state in the United States is its own legal jurisdiction. And with that, there's a requirement that you be qualified in whatever state you want to practice. So for instance, I'm qualified in Wyoming and in Colorado. And so I had to pass the bar exams for those two states to become licensed states. Most of the states require that you study law in the United States in order to be eligible. But there's two exceptions, and that's New York and California. In order to be eligible to sit the New York bar exam, you need to have studied a common law degree. And it needs to be 3 or 4 years in length and offered in full-time and on campus. Now, if you come from a civil law jurisdiction, which I anticipate many of you have, you can become eligible for New York by completing an LLM, a 1-year LLM degree in the United States. Now, California is another jurisdiction that's open to those that did not study law in the United States, but it's different from the basis that you have for New York. California requires that you be licensed, a licensed lawyer in your home jurisdiction. So whether or not you're a common law or civil law qualified, if you're regulated by your governing body for the practice of law in your jurisdiction, and if you have a current practicing certificate, then you're eligible to sit the California bar exam. Now, if you're not a current practitioner in your home jurisdiction, you can also become eligible for California by having that undergraduate law degree and then again completing a 1-year US LLM. And in California, that can be done in an online setting as well. New York requires you to complete your LLM degree in the United States. California is happy with online or a state-based LLM degree. Next slide, please. In terms of the bar exam formats, these are 2-day exams that you complete in either New York or California. Now, current state of affairs with the pandemic is permitting for an online completion of the bar exams, but in usual years, you have to travel either to New York or California to sit the exam in those states. Day 1 is the written portion of the exam, where you're completing a performance test, which is when you're given a client file, a mock file, and you're meant to read through case law and statutory law to pull out the relevant rules of law from that legal precedent. And then you're also meant to pair that with important facts that you pull from whether it's correspondence or interview notes or transcripts. There will be a fact, I guess, documents that have important facts from them. And you'll find the facts and law to pair them together and perform a written attorney work product at the direction of somebody in your firm, which is located in the file. There will be a memorandum in the file that will tell you to draft a piece of written discovery or draft a letter to the opposing counsel. Maybe it's a motion or some kind of legal document to be submitted to the court. Whatever it is you're meant to do, everything will be located, or all the instructions will be located in the file, and the performance test is meant to determine whether or not you have the ability to perform attorney work product. So that's day one morning, and then in the afternoon you're completing essay answers, short answer essays. Day two, you'll be doing 200 multiple choice questions. You'll be answering 200 multiple choice questions, 100 in the morning and 100 in the afternoon. In New York, you're taking 16 different areas of law that you'll be needed to be prepared for. And in California, it's 14 different areas of law. Now in New York, in addition to the 2-day bar exam, you'll have an online state-specific course that you complete, which once you complete that, then you'll do an online open book exam. And this is how New York tests you on New York state-specific law. In California, the California state-specific law is incorporated into their 2-day bar exam. Now, both in New York and California, in addition to the 2-day bar exam and whatever state-specific exam exists in that jurisdiction, you'll also have to complete the ethics exam, which is the MPRE. And this is a 60-question multiple choice question exam that you take in the United States. Most often, the people that are traveling from abroad will travel to New York or California. They'll sit their 2-day exam, and then they'll stay in their jurisdiction for another 10 days until the MPRE is offered. The bar exam itself is offered twice a year, February and July each year, and the MPRE is offered 3 times a year. 2 dates that correspond with those February and July bar exam dates, and then another date that's floating around throughout the year. So you have a few different opportunities to sit the MPRE, but again, it has to be done in the United States. Next slide, please. So that's my quick overview for the US bar exam. And then I want to talk a little bit about the method of qualifying in England. As I mentioned, there are preparation programs for both the US and also England and Wales. And if you're a foreign lawyer, you are likely eligible to sit what's called the Qualified Lawyer Transfer. So the English profession is relatively open, and it doesn't impose restrictions on admission based on where you live or your nationality. Now, the practice of law in England and Wales is regulated by the Solicitors Regulation Authority. And this is the governing body for the practice of law. And they have deemed that a number of jurisdictions in the world have the practitioners that come from those jurisdictions have the ability to sit the QLTS assessment and then become qualified in England. So next slide. The QLTS is a 2-part assessment, and it's offered twice a year. You have to pass the first assessment, which is the MCT. This is the multiple choice test, and this is a computer-based assessment that you take in test centers throughout the world. Once you take the MCT, if you pass it, then you can move on to the second part of the assessment, which is the objective structured clinical examination. So the MCT is a 180 question test It's offered in 1 day, and this is where you're tested in the black letter law or the doctrinal law, the rules of law that we all know govern practice and society. This is where you'll be tested in 11 different outcomes, things like tort, contracts, or criminal procedure, or solicitors' accounts, or financial business, this kinds of thing. And you'll be tested in those rules of law. Once you pass that, then you move on to the OSCE, and this is more of a skills-based assessment. So objective structured clinical examination is a method of testing your ability to perform skills-based duties as a lawyer. So things like legal writing, legal research, legal drafting, client interviewing and drafting of attendance notes of your interviews with clients, and then oral presentation or advocacy. Now, the MCT is offered twice a year in January and July, and then once you pass that, you move on to OSCE, which is offered twice a year in May and November every year. As I mentioned, the MCT can be taken in test centers throughout the world, but the OSCE is offered only in London. And importantly, the QLTS process is only available for this next year, 2021. The SRA is doing away with this method of qualification into England and Wales. Once this goes away, there will be a similar route, but it will be a more difficult route. It's called the Solicitors Qualifying Exam. It'll again be a two-part assessment, but where the MCT is 180 questions, the first phase of SQE will be 360 questions. The SQE2 will look similar to OSCE, but in addition to these two assessments, there will also be a requirement that you complete the equivalent of 2 years of qualifying work experience. And the QLTS has no such work experience requirement. So the method of getting into the solicitor's role in England and Wales as a foreign lawyer is best served through the QLTS because it's a little easier route, and that route is only available for next year. If you're really keen to do this, I'd encourage you to do it sooner rather than later. So contact David and his team so that you can take the quicker and easier route rather than the SQE, which will become the route into practice in 2000. Next slide, please, Alex. And again, the key point here is once you complete either the US bar exam or the QLTS, you are qualified. And in this case, it would be qualified in England and Wales. Next slide. Yeah, so as I mentioned, Barbary is a collaborator with the AIFC, and David and his team are well versed in all things related to the US and the UK qualifications. So should you have additional questions, please feel free to contact them at your leisure. David, I'll pass it back to you and we can open it up to questions or whatever you wanted to do in terms of next steps on the webinar.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chris. Excellent, terse, and to the point overview. Chris, you may want to mention, if you could, for the audience, for the US bar exam prep, the 6 and 10 month options and how those work and the timing around them.
Yeah, so we have extended programs in 6 or 10 month lengths. If you're doing a 6 month program, you would be beginning either in February or September every year. And each of those would lead into either the February or July bar exams. And you would be looking to do about 20 to 30 hours of study each week on a 6 month program. On a 10 month program, you would be beginning that program either in April or September of every year. And again, those lead into either of the bar exam dates, whether it's February or July. On a 10 month program, you'll be studying 10 to 15 hours each week. Now, the Barbary program is entirely offered online. We have a learning management system where you get your entire curriculum. But we also, in addition to that online curriculum, we send hardbound books that you'll be studying from as well. And over the 6 or 10 months, we'll be assigning you instruction on a daily basis, again, either online or through the hardbound books that you'll be studying 10 or 15 hours on a 10-month program or 20 to 25 hours on a 6-month program.
Great. Thank you, Chris.
You're welcome.
Almas, did we have questions come in from any of our participants?
Yes, David, considering that today's info session is the second one in this month, and also that the content was very informative, covering all the details, there are not so many questions, but several requests for today's slides. With permission from Chris, may I share the slides with the audience? Thank you. And the only question is, when the AML certification program will be?
So we will publish that soon. Basically, the certificate programs are going to run from October through June, May or June of next year. And we're scheduling them in a way to enable those who would like to participate in more than one. So we're scheduling them in a way that generally there will not be overlap between the various certificate programs. So that maximizes your opportunity to take multiple programs. Because we're just waiting for a couple final confirmations from a couple of the lecturers, we didn't publish the date yet for these. However, these are coming soon, and certainly your specific question about AML and compliance, we will shortly have that published with the exact date so that you can plan accordingly.
Thank you, David. There are no questions yet. So I guess if anyone from audience wants to share their questions, please feel free to send to our email.
Excellent. Okay, I'd like to thank Almas for your support. Chris Jorgensen, our guest speaker today. Chris, thanks so much. As always, it was great seeing you again. We really appreciate your support.
Thank you, David.
And for all of our participants, thank you for joining us today. Please send us your follow-up questions. We'll be sending out, as I said, information about how to register and other relevant points. And if there's anything we can do, send us an email to any of us individually or to our general mailbox at the Academy of Law, and we'd be happy to meet with you or at least have a Zoom call, I guess, in this environment, virtual meetings, and try to address any questions that you have to make the process easy for you. So thanks so much to everybody. Chris, thanks again. And to our guests, be safe. Have a great rest of your day. We hope to see you all soon. Bye-bye.